All right, P.A.S. report listeners, the holiday season is here. Why not make your life easy and choose design-it-yourself gift baskets? Whether it's a gift for that special someone, family, friends, employees, corporate clients, you don't have to rack your brain anymore. These gift baskets are perfect for any person. At designityourselfgiftbaskets.com, gift baskets can be fully customizable, or you can choose hundreds of pre-arranged gift baskets. Design It Yourself gift baskets are festive for the holiday season, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, and you can be sure that these beautifully decorated gift baskets will make anyone feel appreciated. No matter who you're shopping for, go to designityourselfgiftbaskets.com. And best of all, you get to save money. P.A.S. report listeners can get 10% off your order using code P.A.S. at checkout. So go to DIYGB.com, find the perfect gift this holiday season, and use coupon code P.A.S. at checkout to get 10% off today.
Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Happy Thanksgiving and welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. I got a great episode lined up because now that Republicans are all set to take the majority in the House of Representatives on January 3rd, it's important to examine what the 118th Congress will look like. What are legislative priorities? What will the investigations focus on? How should Republicans proceed? These are all important questions. And these important questions are what I want to tackle in this episode. And I have advice for the new Republican House. And they better listen up if they want to position themselves for 2024, because I already see the Republicans falling into the same traps that they had in the past. At this point, there is no room for error. There is no room for error given the stakes, and they need to smarten up. While Republicans have to play it smart, the Democrats seem to have been lulled into a false sense of security because of the better-than-expected midterm results. They have shown no signs or willingness whatsoever to reverse course with their failed policy agenda. So it appears that both parties have their issues, that they have lessons learned that they don't want to learn. I also want to talk about the former president. The president announced his 2024 candidacy, and I'll break it down. But I want to focus on the Attorney General Merrick Garland's announcement that he appointed a new special counsel to investigate the former president. What is this? The 1,000th investigation into the former president? Is this special counsel going to be similar to the corrupt Mueller special counsel that investigated Russiagate, only to announce they had nothing? It was a hoax. Is this special counsel 2.0? Where will it go? And these are important questions. I'll focus on it all. I'm going to keep this episode a little shorter than normal because I'm sure many of you would rather be prepping for Thanksgiving than listening to me. Before I jump in, make sure you go to the PAS Report website, pasreport.com, sign up for the newsletter there. Also, if you find the show informative, share it with your family and friends. And I want to hear from you. Write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop me an email, podcast@pasreport.com, because I love hearing from my audience and I want to know what you're thinking. Now, the legislative picture appears to be set. Democrats retain the Senate with a +1 majority pending the outcome of the Georgia runoff election. Even if Senator Warnock loses, Democrats will still retain the majority because it will be 50-50 with the vice president casting the tie-breaking vote. The Republicans seem to have a slim majority in the House. They're going to be the majority party, and they get to set the House agenda. And this is where it's going to be interesting. We have a divided government, and at least that should be enough to put the brakes on the failed agenda currently being implemented. However, I am concerned regarding the Republican agenda, and it appears Republicans learn nothing from the past. They continue to make the same mistakes over and over again. So what am I talking about? Last week, Republicans came out and announced that they will be conducting several investigations into the president and his administration. Now, it's not that I have a problem with the investigations. It's I have a problem with the announcement of the investigations. First, rather than announce the investigations, the Republicans should have announced their legislative priorities. I said that online. I got some pushback from some people. Some said that they could do two things at once. Other Republicans said that since the Senate won't even consider Republican legislation, that there's no point in wasting time and effort pushing the legislative agenda. Others said, too bad, this is payback for how Democrats abuse their powers with endless investigations, 2 impeachments into the former president, and that Republicans should do whatever it takes to do the same thing to President Biden and Democrats. But this is a mistake, and I understand the feelings and the animosity out there. We live in an emotionally and politically charged environment, but if the midterms have shown us anything, it's that you cannot win elections by simply pointing out to the other side and how bad the other side is. That only works for Democrats. It doesn't work for Republicans. Republicans have to show that they have the plans to solve the problems ordinary Americans are facing. Hear me out on this. Before announcing the investigations that are going to be taking place, Republicans should have explained what their legislative priorities are. This is not to say that the investigations aren't important. They are, and I'll explain them in a minute. But announcing these investigations, it's nothing more than red meat to the base. It's not going to win over any new voters. The majority of people out there, they're not political animals. So it's not like they will be following these investigations really closely and seeing what the latest developments are. And it's not like the mainstream media outlets are going to cover these investigations. They're simply going to downplay it. They're going to ignore them. They're going to say it's nothing more than a Republican hit job. You have other people who are tired of the endless investigations, especially when these investigations don't lead to any reforms. They don't lead to any changes. The fact is that equal justice is essential in the system, but the midterm showed us that people want solutions to their problems. That's what they want, and that's why Republicans should have introduced a legislative agenda first. They should explain how they intend to introduce legislation that will open up our gas and oil wells, allow companies to produce more oil and gas, bringing more supplies on the market, lowering the price at the pump, building the pipelines, make America an energy exporter again. Some are going to push back and say, well, what's the point of that? The Senate's never going to consider a bill like that. And even if the Senate did consider it, the Democrats would vote it down or President Biden would veto it. So what's the point? Well, the point is to get the Democrats to vote against this type of bill. Get them on record. For the Democrats that vote against this bill, you just cut your first campaign ad at a 2024 election season that could be used in all districts against them. In the Senate races, the presidential race, and the House races, doesn't matter. Get these people on record. Democrats are going to have to defend 23 Senate seats in the 2024 elections. Many of these Senate seats are going to be competitive races. Some are going to take place in red states. States where the constituencies want to see lower energy costs. So put these people on record voting against lowering energy prices. This bill would also be aimed at helping to rein in inflation to a large degree. The inflation that's out of control, that's breaking the budgets of households throughout the United States, forcing families to decide what bills to pay and what bills they can't afford to pay. And that's why announcing this legislative agenda is critically important. Another piece of legislation they should immediately introduce, this also helps with inflation, is to rein in government spending. Republicans need to put forward legislation that reduces government spending and puts the United States on track towards some semblance of fiscal responsibility. Over the last 20 years, Republicans preached about fiscal responsibility, but when they had the power, they increased spending just as much as Democrats. And this is what has led to Republicans losing an enormous amount of trust, not only by their ordinary constituencies, and I'm talking about Republicans and conservatives, but they've lost an enormous amount of trust amongst independents. There is nothing more that turns voters off than when a party constantly preaches one thing and then does the exact opposite once they get into power. And one of my listeners, they brought this up to me. They brought up a great point when it comes to independence. He explained how independent voters like himself are losing faith in the electoral process, where they believe that it doesn't really matter who they vote for, which political party they vote for. Independents, by their nature, already view the parties as trying to figure out which one's the lesser of two evils. And I'm quoting directly from one of my listeners, quote, independent voters are tired of being neglected, disrespected, and trivialized by the GOP, end quote. One of the biggest problems he pointed out is how Republicans claim to be the party of small, limited government, yet they continually increase the size and scope of the government apparatus. Just look at former President Bush and the Republicans back then. They oversaw the largest expansion of government in our history, and how's that working out for everyone? It's why we need to get back to the core principles of old republicanism, where government is flawed, liberty is best protected in the small state, and the government that governs the best governs the least. We need to govern from that perspective, and House Republicans would be wise to commission studies on inefficient and ineffective government programs, and they should start dismantling these programs. They should also study the potential benefits and drawbacks of cutting and eliminating some of the cabinet-level departments and agencies within the federal apparatus and begin to downsize government. This is going to be critically important. Limited government always works best. Another thing House Republicans should push is a constitutional amendment implementing term limits for members of the House and Senate. This should be a no-brainer, and it should be the cornerstone of the GOP and their platform. Nothing says reducing the power of government like implementing a new check, of course, term limits being that check. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that this would ever happen, but again, the point is to get every member on record. A lot of times a bill won't go to the floor unless the speaker thinks it has a chance of passing, which is dumb. Let this go to the floor, let it be debated, and let it be voted on. When it comes to ordinary Americans, the one thing that most registered Democrats and Republicans can agree on, almost universally, is term limits. The overwhelming majority of the American people would support this regardless of the political party they subscribe to. So put it out there and put everyone on record. Let them vote for it and show where they stand on this issue. Another bill that they should be putting forward is an immigration bill that backs Democrats into a corner, offers a real solution to secure our border, and one that solves illegal immigration while overhauling the legal immigration process to make it more streamlined and easier for those who are actually going to add real value to our society. Legislation like this is important. And if Republicans do the things I say, it shows Republicans are serious about governing, that it's not about party, it's not about power. It's about governing, that they have plans designed to alleviate some of the problems we face. More importantly, it puts Democrats on record in the House as to where they stand on these issues. Over the next several weeks, I'm going to explain policy solutions to a variety of problems that we face, what legislation could be developed, but I wanted to highlight these first briefly so that you get the point. Because one of my fears is that we're going to repeat the whole repeal and replace debacle. For 6 years, Republicans campaigned on repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. They won the House back in 2010. They won the Senate back in 2014. They won the presidency. And when they had all the power, what did we learn? What did we learn? We learned that over the course of the 6-year period, the Republicans didn't have a plan ready to go. They didn't have a piece of legislation to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They didn't have anything to replace it with. Sorry, but that's unacceptable in my opinion. They should have had legislation ready to go on the first day. Legislation that was already sorted out between all factions of the party. Legislation that would have sailed through the process because all the studies were already conducted, all the experts already testified, and you had universal agreement. Instead, it was a huge failure, and we can't repeat the mistakes of the past. We can't repeat these types of failures because it made the Republicans look incompetent. Not just to Democrats, not just to independents, but also to ordinary Republicans and conservatives like myself. Now, even though I do say that a legislative agenda should be the priority and they shouldn't have announced these investigations, that does not mean that I don't think the investigation should happen or I don't think the investigations are important. They certainly are. Let's face it, in our busy lives, we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. In fact, according to the CDC, only 1 in 10 Americans are eating the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables each day, missing out on essential vitamins, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants. And that's where Balance in Nature comes in. Balance in Nature sources only the best produce, free from pesticides, heavy metals, and harmful bacteria. And Balance in Nature is the best fruit and vegetable product on the market. They use only fresh, whole fruits and vegetables inside each capsule. They don't use any GMOs, fillers, binding agents, or preservatives of any kind. I would never endorse a product that I don't use myself, and since using Balance in Nature, I feel more alert, I have more energy, my focus is sharper, and I feel great. Live life to the fullest and choose Balance in Nature. P.A.S. Report listeners can get 35% off the first preferred order. Start getting the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables you need by using code PAS at balanceofnature.com. I wouldn't have said a thing, though. I wouldn't have said anything about any type of investigation we're holding. What I would have done was I would have waited till January 3rd, and literally that day, I would have blitzed them with subpoenas. And these subpoenas would be to preserve all documents, preserve all electronic files, and immediately turn them over to the House. Once those subpoenas were issued, on January 4th, I would issue a second round of subpoenas calling on individuals to provide public testimony. And there are a number of investigations that need to be conducted. But the most important, the top investigation, it's actually not the Biden crime family. It's not the Biden family business. The most important investigation should be focused on the FBI and how the FBI has been weaponized politically to target political opponents. To me, this is the most important investigation because you cannot have a bureaucracy as powerful as the FBI pushing an ideological agenda, and yet that is exactly what we've been witnessing over the last several years. Just look at how they raided anti-abortion protesters' homes. These were people who went to abortion clinics and were literally praying in front of them. They were singing hymns in front of the abortion clinics. And what did the FBI do? Well, the FBI raided their homes as if they were members of Al-Qaeda. It was disgraceful. Guns drawn, kids inside these homes, treating them as if they're nothing more than terrorists. It really was disgraceful. And we all know how the FBI has lied to the FISA court, how they manipulated evidence to target political opponents. The federal courts even lambasted the FBI on 4 occasions last year. On 4 occasions for illegally accessing the NSA repository on Americans. This is unacceptable, and it's clear the FBI has become a corrupt political organization. So this, to me, is the most important investigation. Once the investigation is completed, Republicans need to introduce legislation stripping the FBI of certain functions. More importantly, they need to put safeguards in place to ensure these abuses never happen again. You cannot have a corrupt bureaucracy like this, especially with an institution as powerful as the FBI that could literally destroy lives. And as we head into the 118th Congress, there's another investigation that needs to continue, actually. I believe that Republicans should continue the January 6th investigation. You know, when Speaker Pelosi vetoed McCarthy's Republican picks to sit on the January 6th committee, I wonder if McCarthy's going to follow through and on his word and not allow Congressman Schiff and Fang Swalwell to sit on the committee. See, normally I would say it's important that Republicans show they could rise above petty politics, but Schiff and Swalwell are key players in the complete weaponization of our government. They are toxic. But we need to have the January 6th committee continue. And the focus of the committee should be on how January 6th was allowed to happen in the first place. If it was a planned event and we had intelligence showing the potential for violence, why didn't the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, the Speaker of the House, the Capitol Police, the D.C. Mayor, or anyone else do anything to stop it? I mean, this is a legitimate question. If we have the intelligence that showed that this had the potential to get to violence and storming of the Capitol, then why did it happen? Why weren't strict security protocols adopted? More importantly, did any federal officials participate in what happened on January 6th? Did any federal officials engage in any criminal behavior? Did they incite any type of criminal behavior? We need answers to make sure that we never see another January 6th again. That is critically important. And Democrats, yes, they've been using January 6th as a bludgeon, as a tool to beat their political opponents. But the reality is that we cannot allow January 6th to happen again. Not for nothing, but looking at January 6th, I mean, it was a bunch of red-tagged people that stormed the Capitol. People that aren't the sharpest knives in the drawer, let's be honest about that. Imagine this was some sophisticated terror organization like Al-Qaeda. Imagine the damage that could have been inflicted on our government. So we seriously need answers to what took place on January 6th. What did the government know? When did they know it? And why didn't they do anything to stop it? Why didn't they take security measures much more seriously, the way they should have? We need to know the answers for that. And there are some that just don't want to hear it. They just want, all the fascists to be thrown in prison, throw away the key, no trials or anything, just lock them up for life. And they think that the problem goes away. But no, a much bigger problem exists. So that's another investigation that we need to happen, that we need it to continue, because we need to know exactly who knew what and when they knew it. Obviously, the investigation that everyone is looking at is the Biden family business. Now, this is where Republicans have to be really careful. Really careful. In my opinion, there is clear criminality in this case. But you don't want it being viewed as some type of partisan hit job. And I know it's going to be viewed that way. It's impossible not to, right? Republicans are investigating President Biden, who's of a different political party, so it's going to look completely partisan. But this is a guy that basically sold out the United States. He sold out you, the taxpayers. And Democrats and the media, they're already pushing a narrative that Republicans want to investigate Hunter Biden. The Republicans have to make this clear. It's not about Hunter Biden. Nobody cares about Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is a troubled soul. That's what he is. And he was someone that was exploited by his daddy. That's what it is. It's about the big guy. It's not about Hunter. It's about the big guy. This investigation has to be centered around President Biden himself. Did he sell access in return for millions of dollars? We need to know. We kind of do know the answer to that question, but we need it more official. At the end of the day, Republicans should focus on whether President Biden himself corrupted the offices he held and whether he is compromised by any foreign entities. All criminal evidence should be forwarded to the Department of Justice. Now, I know what you're going to say. You're going to forward the evidence to the Biden Department of Justice? Even though we all know the likelihood of the Department of Justice bringing charges against Biden is nil. However, it's still important to get that evidence to the Department of Justice for a couple of reasons. But you want to get it on record, and maybe after 2024, if you learn how to win an election, maybe we'll have a different Department of Justice where equal justice under the law will actually have some meaning. Maybe, just maybe. Because we need the truth exposed. And I will say this to any Democratic listeners out there. It has nothing to do with Biden being a Democrat. I could care less that he's a Democrat. I believe that any officials within our government, where their children are going around the world raking in millions to billions of dollars by selling access, we need to expose it all. We need to prosecute it all, regardless of their political party. It should be unacceptable. And listen, I want Democrats to go down for this, and I want Republicans to go down for this. You don't sell the American people out like that. This is why Republicans should be introducing legislation that bans family members from engaging in this type of activity. Again, it may be a bill that's going to die in the Senate or gets vetoed. It may be a bill that doesn't even make it out of the House. God only knows how many family members of Republicans are on the take that Republicans would vote against it. But we should be getting every member of Congress on record on where they stand. Do they want to still enrich their family members, sell access? Or do they want to side with the American people and make sure that corruption is rooted out within our government? It would be an interesting question. It would be an interesting bill, and it would be an interesting vote, that's for sure. But this leads to the question of whether or not President Biden is going to get impeached. See, a lot of Republicans are already calling for the impeachment of President Biden. Why? It's a waste of time. We all know he's not going to be removed from office. You're not getting 67 senators to remove him from office. And I understand that the Democrats weaponized the impeachment process for political purposes. This did enormous damage to the system. However, I do not want to see a tit-for-tat BS game where whenever we have a president and the House is controlled by the opposing party, we see impeachments. It's not healthy for the system. It's not healthy for the people. It's not healthy for the country. And if there is criminality, then it could be prosecuted when he leaves office. Besides, do any one of you really want President Cackles? I don't think so, because I know I certainly don't. So I would not move to impeach President Biden. I will state that loudly. I want to expose the corruption. I want to expose the criminality. But impeachment, no point for it. At least for President Biden. I would call for impeachment of DHS Secretary Mayorkas. This is a guy who routinely testifies that the border is secure, blatantly lying to members of Congress, which is a crime. We all know that, right? I know, only Republicans get charged with that crime. But he says the border is secure even while under oath and testifying. And if he truly believes that this is what a secure border looks like, then he has no business being the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. So either way, he shouldn't be in that position. He is guilty of dereliction of duty, and he should be removed from office. And I do believe that he deserves to be impeached. I doubt the Senate's going to remove him from office, but don't be surprised that there would probably be a few Senate Democrats that are willing to cross over and actually vote to remove him from office. There's a lot of people who are very unhappy with Secretary Mayorkas' leadership, and either way, it would send a message that accountability matters. Accountability within our system matters. Competence matters. So I fully advocate for Secretary Mayorkas to be impeached, not for political purposes, but for lying to Congress and extreme incompetence. That's why he should be impeached. Has nothing to do with the political party. And this now brings me to Merrick Garland's announcement that he is appointing a special counsel to investigate former President Trump following Trump's announcement that he's all in for 2024. As a side note, I will not get into the 2024 presidential race until more candidates announce. Once they do, I will go through each candidate and identify their strengths and weaknesses. However, Garland's announcement was not surprising. It's like a series of never-ending investigations that never produce anything, and it's so frustrating because it's all political. We all see it. However, there's a whole half of the country that either they see it and they just don't care, or they see it and they're actually rooting for it. And that's scary. You know, when it comes to President Trump, the former president, I don't care. Everyone has their mind made up on him. You either love the guy, you despise the guy, you want him to be president, you don't want him to. I really don't care. But this is the most investigated person in the history of the United States. Does anyone doubt if they had strong evidence of criminal behavior that he wouldn't have already been charged, tried, and convicted? I mean, come on now. Again, things like this, they don't do anything to restore faith and heal political divisions. Instead, they view Trump as a threat, but more importantly, they view his supporters as a threat. They despise his supporters. They label his supporters as fascists and threats to the republic. They want to provoke the supporters, and it's completely ridiculous. And listen, to everyone out there, if we take President Trump's name out of the equation, just install another Republican. Pick any Republican name you want, and while they'll go after Trump or more visceral, don't forget, they tried to destroy George W. Bush, labeling him as a racist, as a hate monger, as the second coming of Adolf Hitler. They labeled John McCain that. They labeled Mitt Romney that. So it doesn't matter who the Republican is, and I want to make it clear that Democrats routinely target whoever the Republican is. They will subscribe the worst motives to any Republican it is. Now, consider that the Attorney General's statement when he announced the special counsel, and I actually want to read a section, so let me read this section. Quote, "The Department of Justice has long recognized that in certain extraordinary cases, it is in the public interest to appoint a special prosecutor to independently manage an investigation and prosecution. Based on recent developments, including the former president's announcement that he is a candidate for the president in the next election, and the sitting president's stated intention to be a candidate as well, I have concluded that it is in the public interest to appoint a special counsel." Now, I want you to think about what he's saying here. He is saying that since the former president announced his candidacy, and since the current president has announced that he has an intention to run for re-election, it was necessary to appoint a special counsel. And according to the Attorney General, it's necessary to show, quote, "the department's commitment to both independence and accountability in particularly sensitive matters," end quote. I mean, is he kidding me? Did he forget that there is currently an ongoing investigation into Hunter Biden by the feds in Delaware? Why no special counsel there? Is it because maybe the fix is in and they are trying to run the clock on the statute of limitations? Could that be why? You know, it's moves like this that directly undermine the federal institution. It's moves like this that make people question their faith in the institutions. It's moves like this that show they don't care about the perception, and they care more about politics than they do about objectivity, facts, and laws. If you're going to appoint a special counsel to investigate the former president, fine. Then why not appoint a special counsel to investigate the sitting president's family? By Merrick Garland's own rationale, that's exactly what should be done. But he's nothing more than a partisan hack doing President Biden and Democrats' bidding. If he had an ounce of integrity, he would have appointed 2 special counsels. But integrity, it's in short supply these days. And mark my words, I will tell every one of you, an indictment is coming. It's not coming in the next week or the next month. The indictment's going to come after a whole bunch of candidates announce, and then at some point next year, the DOJ will announce that they are going to indict presidential candidate Donald Trump. And they're going to do that in an attempt to throw the Republican primary into complete chaos. That's what it's really about. Listen, to me, it's simple. If anyone breaks the law, they deserve to be prosecuted. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's President Biden, former President Trump, Hunter Biden, Don Jr. I don't care who it is. I don't care what political ideology they subscribe to. But you cannot tell me that this isn't partisan. This is so blatantly partisan. And this is what they do in banana republics in third world countries. So I will tell you now, we are in for one hell of a ride as this goes forward. But the most important thing in this episode is that you understand that politics is one part of life. Faith, family, relationships, they are so much more important. And remember that this Thanksgiving. Sometimes you have to tune out all the noise. You have to appreciate those closest to you. And I hope that all of you and your families have a happy Thanksgiving. Times may seem bleak right now, but remember, we live in the greatest country the world has ever seen. We've been through difficult times before, but we've always emerged stronger. This time will be no different. I hope you found the content of this episode informative. I wish you and your families the happiest of Thanksgivings. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.